Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Seer session. As always, we are showcasing some of the partners within the Seer 365 network and some of the stories and experiences they have to tell about working within the industry. Today, I am joined by Optimum in ERP training specialists. They have got experience across the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem, but also across the board with other ERP and CRM solutions as well. That's not our only guest today, though. We're also joined by Suraj, who is Head of Digital Transformation at Weetabix. Really excited about today's conversation. I think training and change management is an absolutely crucial and often underlooked part of digital projects. So, Joe, over to you to run us through today.
Thank you, Rufus, and thanks for inviting us along to your webinar. And a big thank you to Suraj, who's given up his time to join us and share his story. And the reason we asked Suraj on the call with us is he's got a really good story. It's a really good example of how impactful the right training approach can be, especially with a large enterprise organisation. So it's definitely worth listening to. And like you say, training is often the poor relation, thought about too late, not at all, sold incorrectly, and it's absolutely critical to the success of the overall programme. You know, it drives adoption, accelerates the license consumption, reduces the support costs, and our job on any project is just to get the end users confident and competent and productive in using the system in the way it was intended. So those organisations tend to reach ROI much quicker. And we worked with Weetabix. We were just chatting earlier before we went live, because I think we supported AX 2009, if I'm right, and maybe then not too much support on AX 2012. And then we were awarded the training contract to support the much bigger transformation programme to D365. And I remember, Suraj, the senior leadership team recognising really early on, which is quite rare. We get some organisations who come to us early and they want to plan for training and they want to know how it looks and what it's going to cost. But then we also get the latecomers, which for various reasons, they don't really know about training. You know, how hard can it be? It's just training on the system. And then, 3 months before they go live, they contact us and we can often help them, but it's much better to have that lead time. And Nikki, I don't know if you remember, but we had a call with the project sponsor at Weetabix, which has never happened. So we had the calls with the change team and the project team, and we developed a proposal and did the indicative costs. And then it was like, yeah, the project sponsor wants to talk to you. And that's the first time that's happened. And we were really excited because he was really interested in training. And obviously that lends itself well to the success of your program, Suraj, and how well it's been adopted.
Yeah, very much. I mean, again, we were discussing before this call, training was not an afterthought. I think we saw this very much as a change management program. Our history's got lots of examples of poor implementations. We get bogged down by the technicalities of delivering the application and try to squeeze the training in, and it doesn't take much to go wrong and go live for the effort of training to come back to roost. So every customer for us, the way we deal with Asda is different from the way we deal with Tesco, and it could be a click of a button or a process which needs to be done one way or the other, because one is a case pick, another one is a pallet pick. It's intuitive when you know it, but it's a new system. For the first few weeks, it is not. And the effort you put in is just absolutely invaluable. It takes, like I said, very little to go wrong in go live for it to have a cascading impact. And you get bogged down with process and training bugs rather than the technical bugs. And if you want to run a program well, you better keep those out of your way so you can focus on the things which need a technical input, not ones which can get resolved with a process adherence or a understanding of what to do and when. So yeah, very much agree.
Sort of understanding all of your options earlier on, you didn't engage us early, but we had conversations around how it might look, what it might cost, what internal resources we could upskill to be part of that training program. And then, like you say, you kept us on ice for a year. But understanding all of your training options early is invaluable to know.
Absolutely. I think for us to be clear on how we're going to go to training is really important early on. I've spoken to other companies. I mean, I'm not, as I've told you, I'm not a serial IT person. I came into the head of digital transformation from a commercial role. Head of sales is what my job was. So I spoke to a lot of companies who were looking at ERP implementation to talk to their journey and where they struggle particularly. And it is training comes at the back end of the program, and they think they have the program team available to develop the training material. Invariably, too many things go wrong in SIT and UAT, and you start figuring out you're eating into that runway you think you have, and that runway soon disappears, and you're scrabbling around. And when you step out of the program team and walk the floor and speak to users, as I've done again in these places to get their understanding of the implementation, you find how little needs to go wrong for them to have a really poor impression of the implementation, and that extends hypercare. I think our go live was good. First 2 weeks, the bugs were nominal, and we were wrapping up hypercare at the end of second month because we knew what the technical issues were and their rest. So I really think it's quite important. We looked at different options. We obviously looked at all the scenarios. And developing training material or delivering training for me is three skills. It's not one. It's somebody who understands the knowledge and the application, which is where your SI partner comes in, your team comes in, you guys came in. Second is developing the content. It's not a skill which companies like ours have. That's not what we do. We sell Weetabix, we sell boxes. That's what our skill set is. To develop training content is not our bag. And then delivering the training, which is where we took hold again to say that it's best that our people speak to our users in the language they understand and emphasize the aspects where the change is more or less, because that's tailoring your delivery to the audience. So we chose that approach very quite deliberately, I would say.
Suraj, can I ask a question about the type of tools that you evaluated with regards to what you felt would be right for the training program? You obviously have a lot of ERP implementations that go completely the digital adoption platform route. Did you find that you investigated those tools? Did any come up good?
So we looked at it, and it's very alluring when you have the gift of time that you can do all of this yourself, and these tools are intuitive, helps you to record your transactions, and you can overlay, and you can do this and that. But it underplays the time it takes to get it right. So we looked at it, and we have a place for the tools when it comes to MNs, and as we go rolling out PUs and we're having optimizations, and we need to keep the training artifact alive, those tools come in handy. But our assessment was that for the breadth of the solution, we were doing a full F&O, manufacturing, order to cash, P2P, finance, all the modules. For the breadth of the solution we needed, if you have the gift of time and lots of capable people, yes, you could go down that route. But our view very quickly was that it is not a native skill we have. It's not where we are best placed. I think the superiority of our solution comes from taking out customizations, from engaging with the users for them to understand the solution. That's where we will deliver value, not by trying to develop the content. So the role of the tools is vital, but in our context, in the context of what we were trying to do, it's more a maintenance. Once the basic training module delivery is there, the upkeep and the maintenance is where we see those things coming in. It was just too big. It's too big to try and swallow the whole thing and imagine we could do it ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. In our experience, it typically ends up being a blended approach for those large ERP implementations, because with those processes that are really heavy and complex, trying to build out that solution and that learning element in a digital adoption platform takes such a large amount of time. And as you say, the resources are just not on the project team to be able to do that. And then revisiting and editing as things arrive or come out of UAT, we found with a number of our clients, we've gone in and actually done some typical development of materials outside of that digital learning platform so that we can facilitate things like classroom training with scripts and trainer packs. So that combined, our blended solution definitely works as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm interested in, Suraj, obviously sort of taking a bit of a step back. When you first began on this journey with this F&O project, when you stepped into role, were kind of your main concerns straight off the bat? What were you most worried about?
I mean, there's a lot to worry about as a program leader in an ERP program. There's plenty to worry you, but clearly we know getting the solution ready in time and cost and budget within the mandate expected is a problem in its own right. So I chose to focus our energies on the bits we were good at and take away the bits which we could use partners to help us with. So that is where I think Optimum came in, and we knew we could rely on them to help us with the training while we could focus on what we needed to do, which is our legacy system had north of 100 customizations. We had in no way we wanted to inherit that as a part of the ongoing platform. And eliminating customization is a lot of conversations with the user group to understand why they can change and how they should change and how the new process will work. That's where we thought the true value of digital transformation for us would be. That's where the true value of something which is evergreen is going to come through, not in the other aspects. And that's why we chose to double down our effort in getting the quality of the solution right and making it evergreen fit. We just had to be in that space where this wasn't going to be a baggage we had to carry forever. So I don't know, Rufus, if I've answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of user feedback loop is so crucial to actually getting a project embedded and making sure that you've kind of got that, the users are feeding back to you what they actually need from a system so that they will find it useful. I mean, this is kind of an open question. Like, what were some of the initiatives? How did you all in collaboration kind of go about achieving that?
So this was, again, we had this conversation before the call, a hugely business-sponsored project. So this wasn't a technology project at all. Me with no experience having done international sales has no reason, would not be a typical person to lead a program of this size. But it was very much to try and keep the technology in service of the business, not the other way around. And we seconded people in the program. We brought into the team people who are process experts. So somebody was in procurement dealing with P2P, somebody's in customer service team, specific process experts into the team, and they learn technology, not the other way around, not the technology people trying to understand process. It was deliberately built the other way around. And we had massive top management sponsorship. I mean, Nikki Jo spoke about the conversation with the sponsor, but not just that. I mean, every quarter for the 2 years I was in this program, we would have a 2-hour meeting with the senior leaders of the business. So that's 35 people stopping their day job, 2 hours to talk about how we're running on the program and how things are going. And my mandate in that meeting was not to speak. And the delivery of the conversation was done by the business process owners. So there was a business process owner for order to cash. There was a business process owner for plan to produce. They were telling the rest of Weetabix how the program is going. You obviously have to help them come up with a script, but very quickly that ownership gets distributed, gets shared. It doesn't become the ownership for the program team, because here's my peer who's in charge of supply chain, who's the BPO for order to cash, procure to pay, plan to produce. He's standing in front of his peer group and saying, how's plan to produce progressing on the development track on D365? And then he's facing the questions of how are you going to train your users? How's the warehouse going to work? He's answering those questions. We have to do everything to facilitate them, to equip them to reply. But the moment you get them talking about it, sorry, it's not my project anymore. It's a business project. It's a business initiative. So we deliberately did that, and not one quarter. It's, I can say, 8 meetings like that of 2 hours of the directors and the senior leaders sitting together, talking about where we are on the program. And that's what I said. It's so cultural about how we went about this. And you had to work really hard to change the language with which you speak, because you get a group of people like that and you talk the standard language of FDDs and IDDs and what's happening in Situate, you lose them in 5 minutes, if not quicker. So you really had to work at the language as to how you're going to speak to them so this becomes native to them. So yeah, it was very deliberate in its construct and its management and its focus through and through.
Did they ever sort of talk about the sort of underlying cost of not investing in training? So those hidden costs of, I don't know, not being able to produce enough Weetabix or shipping orders or any of that stuff? Because I think that's a sort of misconception early on. Customers think, oh, that's just too expensive to invest in external trainers and burning my budget. But actually what they don't work out is the cost of not training users correctly. So was that a discussion that was had on Transformabix?
I won't say a discussion, because we landed on that fairly instinctively and quickly. So we didn't need to really debate it too much. But we clearly looked at how many days do we need to stop selling to our customers for a lot of our things to be a good idea to do or not do, as the case might be. We need to when you have as extensive as warehousing and a full F&O, like I said, very little needs to go wrong with any one customer for very quickly this to become a bad idea. So in planning for the go live and planning for the financials for the year, how do you plan a year in which you're implementing ERP? How much disruption do you build in? Do you assume you lose a week's sale in a year where you're doing an ERP because you got a blackout window? You'll have some disruption in the business. What is the assumption for when you're going to get back to customer service? The moment you put 3 months, nobody wants to accept a 3-month delay in customer service getting back to normal. It forces the right conversations to say, what do you need to do for the delay not to be 3 months for customer service? What do you need to do if you want to be able to, our mandate as a business readiness for ERP was our consumers should not notice we've gone through an ERP program. That was our stated mandate. None of the consumers should notice we've gone through an ERP program. Once you start there and start to work back to say, what does customer service need to be? The answers of what you need to do is just it pops out quite naturally at the other end when you start with that endpoint. Because for us as a leading iconic branded consumer goods in the UK, not being noticed in the shelves that we had gone on ERP was a very valid, worthwhile objective. And we had come on the back of some bigger peer group companies in the CPG space having had technology programs gone really bad and having images of empty shelves published in the grocer and the like. So it's not notional. And these are companies which are much, much bigger than us, and they struggled because that's again. So when you start with that end goal and you have this cohort of the senior leaders talking about it, what you need to do is quite evident and simple, and you generate the will and the energy and the support to get behind all of it, because that mandate is something you blindly have to agree, and you quite quickly agree on to the end goal. The rest pops out really when you have the right conversations.
And your change champions as well, they were quite instrumental, weren't they? So Rufus, we do a lot of building internal training capability, and Weetabix requested that we not only develop these, professional training materials, but also upskill a team of change champions to support life after go live. Because it's not just about go live; it's about however many years you're going to be using this software, and having that team. How is that sort of, what's the outcome of having those change champions in the business?
So we had them both from a training delivery and a comms perspective. We had change champions. Some of them were SMEs who were involved in testing and UAT and design and all that stuff. And some were solely there because they were a loud voice within the team. And it felt like having that person on the team delivering the change message is so much easier. Again, we're talking about about 600 handheld users, 300, 350 desktop users. It's still a manageable scale where when you start looking at, who the people are, who you need on your team to land change well. And we got them into the program, and they were the ones delivering the training or delivering the change messages and going back and forth. And that really gets your training material customized, because while you guys understand the solution really well, there is a Weetabixism to everything we do. And there are some aspects which are more important or more tricky or more relevant for one customer or one supplier, which you can never imbue in a standard training material. And that's why you need your change champions or your internal trainers to take that, understand that, and then in their delivery, start reflecting that. So we did that. And I think, Kenjo, you probably know this. We did 3 rounds of training, which I think somebody would say is probably more than we need to, but we did 3 rounds of training in the last 6 weeks before go live. The first round was instructor-led. So the change champions, the trainers you spoke of, were the ones providing the learning, it's a classroom session. The computers are there and they're actually providing the training. A session 2 was they're there in the room. The attendees do the modules themselves, and they have the trainer there to ask if they need questions. And the last one we had for them doing some qualification or clearance modules. Only on completion would they get the log on. So as you came towards go live, just getting a mail out saying 60 people haven't got their log on just generates the right behavior. Very quickly, it gets people looking at it and they have to do it themselves. And you just have to plan all of these quite deliberately. They don't just happen. And there's enough happening on the technical side, which occupies your headspace. So you have to give this a lot of time, because you can't spin business engagement on the back of an email or on the back of a call to action. Getting business engaged is a really deliberate process and needs planning. I'm teaching people to suck eggs here, but I think it's just a realization as to you really have to invest, because the business are not waiting for this to happen to them. You've got to talk to them for a period of time when they come to the same conclusion as you, the guys who are delivering the program. It's got to be that sort of spirit. And then stuff happens and people clear their diaries to make the time, do the testing. It happens.
I really love. Oh, sorry, Joe.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say they had that luxury lead time. And when you have that lead time, you can plan so much better. It's a better outcome for everybody. It's a better outcome for us because we know how many consultants we need to deploy to each customer, and a much better outcome for you guys because, like you say, you put us on ice for a while, called us in. I think we might have offboarded at another sort of short blip and then reboarded again. So the timing is key. And I think another thing to mention that some organizations think the right thing to do is onboard trainers, a year before go live. And it's quite a common mistake. And actually, it's not the right thing to do. You need to get the trainers on board to start developing those outputs when the build is nearly ready. So you're talking around about UAT, which is when everybody is, completely flat out, doing all that sort of testing and go live prep. But doing it any earlier just means the system changes, it evolves, and you have to rework the documents. And we've seen it, Nikki, haven't we, time and time again, where they've burnt for more budget and then they come to us and it's like, well, there's not much budget left for that. What can you do?
Very small purse, but then you need to revisit all of those materials that were produced, but they were produced too early, way before, final solutions were even agreed and there are tweaks being made to the system. So you need to time your development exactly right. So you're definitely getting value for money, but also, there aren't going to be significant changes during the delivery window and post go live.
Sorry, Rufus, I interrupted you.
No, I really liked, I think you've all kind of touched on this idea of personal accountability and the fact that, it was the users that ultimately needed to kind of own the system. I guess my question was kind of around, did you encounter anyone who was really, really resistant to the change? How did you kind of work around those people within the business?
There always are people who are busy or got other stuff going on or got holidays. We were flexible. I think we weren't dogmatic. We were flexible. We're dealing with a site where 2/3 of the users are working in manufacturing or operations. They've got shift patterns and they've got the demands of the BAU. So we were flexible, I would say. We were not like that's the date you turn up or you don't get a training. We were extremely accommodating to the realities of BAU roles. They all have. For me, this was the only job I was doing. They were doing the day jobs and were bolting this on top. So we were completely understanding of that reality. And I think being open, flexible, to my mind, allowed us to minimize the number of problem or hugely resistant to change people, because we were willing to flex, we were willing to zig and zag depending on what was right. And I had people in my team who would offer to work on a Saturday because that's when the line's got a natural shutdown. It's got a natural shutdown. You've got a 4-hour window. That's the best time to do it, because asking people to stop working on the lines and come and do training, it's never going to happen. So the realities of providing training in a manufacturing setup means you've got to be willing to swing with the shift patterns there are and the downtimes there are in the factories. And again, it goes back to planning, because some of our lines run for 3 weeks before they have a downtime. So you cannot orchestrate something in the matter of days, because that's a 3 week before a downtime comes through. So we were flexible, which I think Rufus almost, when you approach it like that, you probably get the same sort of reaction from the counterparty, and they were flexible, and the line managers and the shift managers were flexible because they knew we were trying to accommodate to their realities. Once you take that aspect away, there are some who are problematic. The general ecosystem makes it hard for people to operate like that, because when everybody around you has got a more positive energy and a positive swing, it's harder to be isolated. You become the exception, not the rule. And that, again, is harder for people to hide when that's the general vibe going around. And then you always have the standard line management tools you can deploy if you need to. But that was not our first port of call at all. There were some people, and because we were not going to issue the logon without the training being done, we were quite firm on that. It's your choice. Do you want to go live? Do you want to operate when it goes live? Because the reason you can't do is you haven't done your training, you don't get your logon. You can't run your processes. So the choice is a little bit at the end of the day yours. You want to come into this or not? We'll be as flexible as we can be, as accommodating as we can be to manage your realities, but it's a partnership.
Very nice. So I'm conscious of time. So anyone who is watching live, please do feel free to put your comments in the chat. I'm conscious that, that there's sometimes a little bit of a delay on our side for those to come through. But I mean, Joe, Nikki, Suraj, is there anything that you'd like to sort of touch upon for this call in terms of how you've worked together on this project and kind of what really stood out to you?
A lot of the talking. So Joe, Nikki, it's over to you guys.
For me, and this is not just with Weetabix, this is with other large ERP implementations, it's on making sure that your training program is super flexible for the different work streams and the different user groups, right? So Suraj alluded to this with regards to shift patterns. Our production and warehouse operators do not want to be in a classroom, and they do not do a 9-to-5 job. So you need to come up with a training program that's almost little and often. It doesn't disrupt business as usual. So you're not closing down lines, and you're smart with the way you develop that training program. An accountant, on the other hand, is not going to want half an hour's worth of training. They'll probably want something a little bit more detailed. So again, you need to make sure that whatever training program you come up with is blended and it aligns to all of those different user communities, because one size definitely doesn't fit all. So don't attack or look at your training program as being all classroom, all e-learning, because you need to think about what the learner needs as well. And I think with Weetabix, that was done really incredibly well, because again, Weetabix taking their users on a journey and involving them at all of the stages, including how they got their change champions on board, was reflective of what the end user training program looked like as well. So I would say that's something that you really do need to consider, audiences and a blended approach.
And Joe, yourself?
I was just going to say this, we're talking about a large enterprise, big brand organization here. This also applies to smaller organizations. So, the sweet spot usually for us, we say at 200 users is when you need to get into that bespoke blended learning solution. And for the smaller Business Central rollouts, Nikki actually has just developed this suite of generic e-learning modules, which are short and sharp, and they about 10 to 15 minutes each, I think, and very role-based, but not generic. And then you can add customizations to it if you have ISVs or you want some unique elements. That is a nice little package to get them started. But then when the user numbers start to creep up, you need to start thinking about different horses for different courses, really, because it's not going to suit every different style of training, isn't going to suit everybody in the audience. So you need to think about that blended approach at that certain sweet spot number, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
I sort of mentioned that because I know you've got probably a lot of BC partners who hopefully will watch this.
Absolutely. And I think from a partner perspective, often the training is almost an afterthought for the partner as well, or it's even kind of assumed to be that's an end customer problem. And I don't necessarily think that's the right mindset to take into a project. So
yeah, I think they'd have sort of kudos for going to the customer and saying, have you thought about training? Here are some options you can think about, because those customers are researching and finding us anyway. A bit too late. It would be good if they found us earlier. But I think it also signals that sort of lifetime commitment to the client. Okay, we've thought about this. We have solutions that wouldn't inflate the bid, sort of workshops to do upskilling or create their training plan. So there are ways we can support partners to support the customers to make sure they've got that, end-to-end full project life cycle and have it really successful as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's a statement of intent, isn't it, that this is a partnership and not just a transaction, especially when it's such a big investment into these kind of software solutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, I really want to thank you all for your time. I think it's been amazing, and it's been really, really nice to catch up with you all in terms of how important training and change management is to both Microsoft projects, but also just technology projects in general. Suraj, I really appreciate you sharing some of your story from a Weetabix perspective. And Nikki and Joe, I think your expertise absolutely, massively shines through. So thank you for joining. I'm sure we'll have another session in the near future again on similar topics. And yeah, I hope you have a great day.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank
Yeah.